Accepting Fate follows the transformative journey of Samara Alexandru and her band of resolute warriors as they battle against a dark, sentient storm, a malevolent force that not only wields destructive power but also mirrors and exploits the deepest insecurities and fears of those it confronts. The storm, with its shifting tendrils and mysterious watchers, is more than a natural calamity. It is a living embodiment of despair, drawing strength from isolation and inner fractures. At the heart of the story is Samara, who carries her father's legacy in the form of a luminous pendant, a symbol of hope, resilience, and the power to overcome internal darkness. Alongside her stand steadfast companions, Valentine, whose silent strength and unwavering loyalty serve as an anchor, Selene, a fierce warrior whose sharp resolve is tempered by an underlying vulnerability, and Rafael, a contemplative sage adept in ancient magic. Throughout their trials, each member confronts personal demons, sharing tales of past losses, doubts, and the scars born from previous conflicts. These revelations, raw and cathartic, cement the group's unity and help forge an indestructible bond that the storm can never truly shatter. As the narrative unfolds, relentless battles test the group's physical and emotional limits. In vivid, heart-stopping clashes, the warriors learn that the storm adapts to their defenses, feeding on every moment of hesitation or fracture within them. Yet, through relentless training, overcoming self-doubt, and learning to harness their collective inner strength, the group begins to turn the tide. Their victories, though hard-won and bittersweet, gradually diminish the storm's hold, revealing that true power lies in unity and the courage to confront one's vulnerabilities. In the culminating chapters, as they repair their shattered sanctuary and rebuild a scarred city, Samara and her companions recognize that their story is not one of final defeat but rather a turning point, an ending that paves the way for a new beginning. They choose not to wait for fate to dictate their future, but instead to boldly carve a new path, guided by the steady flame of hope and the lessons learned in their darkest moments. Accepting Fate is ultimately a tale of transformation, a rich fantasy narrative about embracing pain, accepting destiny, and finding the strength in unity to light the way into an uncertain yet promising future. The conclusion of this story marks the closing of one chapter while hinting at a larger epic, where the legacy of their courage will connect to new realms and fresh quests, ensuring that even in the face of relentless darkness, the shared light of hope will always endure.
Accepting Fate.
Michael Archer. This is a work of Ficon. The CIES, various loca-ons, and historical events, as my research states, are indeed true. The names, characters, and incidents either are the product of the author's imagina on or are used ficiously. Any resemblance to actual events or locales or persons, living or dead, is en rely coincidental. Copyright 2025 by Michael Archer. All rights reserved. Printed in the United States of America. No part of this book may be reproduced or transmitted in any form or by any means, electronic or mechanical, including photocopying, recording, or by any informa on storage and retrieval system, without the right and permission of the author except in the case of brief quota ons embodied in CRI Cal AR Clees and reviews. Chapter 1. The Storm's Call. The night trembled on the verge of collapse. An infernal storm raged overhead as if the very heavens were weeping in agony. Rain lashed against every surface with the fury of 1,000 broken dreams, its relentless beat echoing like mournful dirges across the city. In fleeting flashes of lightning, the ruined skyline was revealed in stark detail, swaying trees edged in darkness, shattered glass glittering like shards of despair, and buildings battered by nature's unbridled wrath. It was as if the storm itself were a living, breathing beast, a chaos incarnate waging war against the order of the world. Amid the cacophony, a ghostly moon fought to shine through dense, churning clouds, its soft light casting eerie, elongated shadows that danced along deserted streets. A low, resonant howl pierced the tumult, a sound both feral and commanding, beckoning with an indescribable allure. This was no ordinary night. It was a summons from the darkness. High above the chaos of Las Vegas, in a modest apartment that overlooked the restless city, Samara Alexandru stood transfixed by the rain-streaked window. Her pulse pounded in her ears, synchronized with the rhythm of the tempest outside. Drawn to the storm's wild symphony, she felt that the mysterious howl carried an invitation, a promise of danger and discovery that stirred something elemental deep within her. It was a sound that spoke of ancient secrets and predatory forces lurking on the threshold of two worlds. Samara's striking blue eyes glimmered with intensity, reflecting the tumultuous sky as her long black hair cascaded over her shoulders like a veil of midnight. Clad in a fitted black tank top, rugged jeans, and worn combat boots, she cut a figure as formidable as the storm itself, a lone sentinel in a city known for its glamour, yet haunted by hidden perils. Her mind churned with memories of her father's solemn words, a prophecy etched into her soul long ago. One day, I won't be here. It will be your duty to keep the world safe. Those words, spoken with gravitas and laden with unspoken horrors, had steered her childhood and now defined her destiny. Shaking off the allure of the window, Samara turned and moved with deliberate precision through her apartment, as if performing a sacred rite. She retrieved her arsenal from a concealed section of her closet, each weapon a talisman of survival. A 22-inch machete, its blade glinting with the promise of swift retribution, was strapped securely to her back. Her twin pistols, sleek and powerful, were holstered at her hips, their weight a reassuring reminder of her readiness. Finally, she ran her fingers over the cold, unyielding frame of her prized M16 rifle, a silent guardian for the battles to come. With every step echoing purpose, she locked her apartment door behind her, severing ties with the ordinary world for the night. Descending the narrow, worn stairwell, her combat boots pounded against the concrete with a defiant cadence, challenging the unruly fury of the storm that raged beyond. Reaching the parking garage, she paused momentarily before her sleek motorcycle, a midnight black MTT 420RR whose aggressive lines and raw power mirrored the spectral energy of the Tempest. With practiced ease, she swung her leg over the bike, revving the engine until its roar competed with the howling wind. The rain turned the city's streets into mirrors of chaos, a blur of neon, reflections, and shifting silhouettes. As she accelerated through the deluge, the persistent howl echoed again, now laced with a sinister, otherworldly timbre. It was as if the call had grown more insistent, drawing her deeper into the heart of the night. Acceleration fused with memory. The blurred cityscape conjured fleeting fragments of her past, of a day when life shattered in a brutal home invasion. She remembered the monstrous figures that invaded her sanctuary, their otherworldly strength and ferocity defying reason. In her mind's eye, her father had fought valiantly, a pillar of indomitable will, even as the relentless predators, vampires with eyes like cold, predatory gems, and werewolves whose feral might defied human limits, sank their fangs into their flesh. The echoes of that fateful day haunted her still, the anguished cry of her father, the silent, resigned stare of her mother as life ebbed away, and a promise forged from tragedy that had compelled her to train and to become something more than a victim. Now, as thunder roared overhead and each flash of lightning refracted through the cascading rain, Samara's resolve crystallized. It was as though the storm itself had merged with her grief and resolve. Each droplet, each howl, a driving pulse that surged through her veins. The wild, unbroken force of nature outside had awakened a dormant ferocity inside her. Tonight, she was not merely a witness to the tumult. She was its counterpart, a force in her own right, ready to face horrors that lurked in the forgotten crevices of the city. The narrow avenues and shadowed alleys of Las Vegas transformed around her. Once bustling streets gave way to quiet, foreboding lanes where the neon glow faded into. sinister darkness. In these forsaken corridors, whispers of movement skittered across the pavement, hints of pale figures with predatory eyes and the eerily graceful forms of half-transformed beasts. In the murk, she could almost sense the presence of vampires, their hunger and cruelty waiting hungrily for an unsuspecting soul, and werewolves, their feral instincts poised to unleash violent retribution upon anyone who dared cross their path. The howling, now a tangible force in the night air, led her onward until the urban sprawl yielded to the raw outskirts of the city. Here, amid abandoned buildings and ghostly storefronts, she sensed that her destination lay near, a threshold between the living and the labyrinth of forgotten lore. Every step drove her closer to the summons of the dark, mysterious call that resonated with both danger and destiny. As her motorcycle surged forward over slick asphalt, bolts of lightning illuminated fleetingly the grim faces of passing figures, perhaps a glimpse of an agitated vampire lurking in the recesses of a ruined doorway, or the stealthy, predatory movement of a werewolf stalking its unseen prey. The intertwining of natural fury with supernatural menace painted a tableau of relentless darkness, and Samara's grip tightened on the bike's handlebars as her heart roared like the engine beneath her. In that moment, amidst the tyranny of the storm and the spectral memories of her past, Samara embraced the call. Every fiber of her being pulsed with the conviction that tonight was more than just another violent chapter. It was the inception of an unyielding crusade against the looming darkness that sought to consume her world. The promise of danger, the thrill of combat, and the burning need to honor her father's legacy surged forward with unabated force. Her eyes narrowed as she navigated the labyrinthine backstreets of a city that had once vibrated with life.
Now.
Shrouded in the bruised colors of a turbulent night, Las Vegas revealed its haunted underbelly, a realm where every shadow whispered threats and every echo of the wind carried secrets of ancient, predatory beings. And though terror lurked around every corner, Samara's purpose glowed like an inner flame, unyielding, fierce, and determined. At last, the relentless chorus of the storm and the siren call of the unknown converged into a singular moment of clarity. Samara slowed as she reached a deserted intersection framed by towering derelict structures, where the wind howled with an almost sentient malice. The enigmatic call of that unearthly howl, part promise, part challenge, filled the air, vibrating against her very soul. In that electric silence before destiny's threshold, Samara allowed herself a single, fierce smile. Tonight would mark the beginning of her crusade. Tonight, she would step fully into the darkness and forge her fate with steel and fire. The storm would be her ally, a wild force that reflected her own passionate turmoil, a reminder that even amid chaos, one could carve out order through sheer will. With one final look at the tumultuous skies overhead, Samara revved her engine and charged onward, merging with the ravenous night. Shadows closed in, unholy figures stirred in the periphery. The battle for her soul, and perhaps the world, had begun. And as the wind roared its ancient song, Samara's true colors blazed defiantly, a promise that she would not falter, nor be consumed by the darkness that threatened to reign. The call of the storm had been heard. The night was alive with peril, and the hunt had just begun. Chapter 2: Shadows and Fangs. The night was a living thing, its dark embrace suffocating the cramped walls of the family home. Outside, the storm raged in a frenzy. Rain hammered the windows like desperate, clawed fingers seeking entry, and thunder bellowed in defiant roars. Inside, Samara pressed herself against the doorway, her heart a relentless drumbeat of fear and anticipation. Then, as if summoned by fate, a sharp, deliberate crash shattered the uneasy silence from the front of the house. Before Samara could move, her father, Dragos, sprang into action. His eyes, normally steeled with unwavering resolve, betrayed a turbulent undercurrent of dread as he assessed the sudden threat. With practiced speed honed by years of battling the night's horrors, he barked, stay here. His deep, gravelly tone left no room for argument. Yet, frozen by a cocktail of curiosity and terror, Samara could not tear herself away. A rippling shadow bled across the threshold, a figure shifting like dark liquid, emerging as if from a nightmare. In the flickering lamplight, the intruder's features became disturbingly clear. His angular face, too sharp to be human, and eyes that glowed with an eerie, light-absorbing onyx gleam. Then, with slow menace, his lips curved into a predatory smile that sent ice running down Samara's spine. His canines stretched unnaturally, razor-sharp fangs glistening, an unmistakable signature of the undead. Without hesitation, Dragos launched forward. His fists, driven by a mix of fierce protectiveness and raw adrenaline, crashed into the vampire. The impact resounded with sickening brutality. Flesh met flesh in a flurry of violence, and the force hurled Dragos against the wall. Yet the creature only laughed, a low, guttural sound that dripped with both amusement and venom. In a flash, the vampire's hand lashed out, intercepting Dragos' second blow as though it were a feeble child's play. Samara watched, horrified and transfixed, as the impossible unfolded before her eyes. This was not a mere thief in the night. It was a predator from an age-old nightmare, a creature spoken of only in whispered legends. The vampire's voice, dripping with disdain, slithered over the tense silence. "Is this the best humanity can muster?" he sneered, his onyx eyes narrowing on Dragos. With a casual flick of his wrist, he flung Dragos across the room with supernatural ease. The elder crashed against the kitchen counter, sending knives clattering across the floor in a chaotic symphony of clashing metal. As Dragos struggled to rise, a second horror unfurled at the far end of the room. Samara's mother, Serenity, stood defenseless until another intruder, a second vampire with sinuous grace, emerged from the obsidian shadows. Before she could react, the creature's monstrous strength took hold, and it snatched Serenity with preternatural ease. In a slow, torturous moment, the vampire hoisted her from the ground like a ragdoll, her feeble struggles punctuating the air with desperate cries that cut through the room like clashing steel. Driven by instinct and desperation, Dragos staggered to his feet once more. His eyes blazed as he dove beneath the kitchen counter, reaching into a secret compartment hidden from prying eyes. Clutched in his calloused hand was a weapon he had only ever hoped never to need, a glove. Studded with miniature, venom-infused blades, forged from his own blood and tempered with righteous wrath. Between furious glances exchanged with a second vampire, Samara's gaze darted from her father to her imperiled mother. The second assailant moved with balletic, horrifying grace towards Serenity, his every step echoing death. The glint of the kitchen knife in her hand sent a spark of defiance into the dim light, but before Serenity could muster a counter, the vampire twisted her wrist with supernatural force. With cruel amusement, he pried the weapon from her grasp, his smile deepening into an expression of sadistic pleasure. Then, in a single, fluid motion, he hurled Serenity across the room. Her body slammed into the countertop, the violent impact driving a stray knife deep into her back as if sealing her fate. Time slowed to a suffocating crawl. The storm's cacophony outside faded into insignificance as Dragos cried out, raw, primal, a sound of endless grief as he lunged to tend his wife. But grief would have neither time nor place tonight. The first vampire, relishing the carnage, pivoted his attention back to Dragos. In an explosion of violence, the two clashed, the elder's fists and the vampire's inhuman strength locked in desperate combat. Dragos fought with every ounce of his being, a dance of fury and sorrow, as the venomous blades on his glove carved vicious arcs through the air. With each precise strike, thin ribbons of scarlet blossomed on the vampire's pallid cheek, evidence of the poison that rapidly coursed through its veins. "What have you done?" the creature spat out, shock and fury mingling in his inhuman tone. But the venom's effect was merciless, his body convulsed in agony, his every movement turning erratic cathartic until, finally, he crumpled silently to the ground, a husk of death amid a maelstrom of pain. Even as Dragos knelt to cradle Serenity, who now lay motionless on the cold, blood-spattered floor, Samara's shock gave way to frantic concern. Her trembling hands reached to her mother, pressing futilely against the wound that oozed dark, slow-spilling blood. Serenity's once vibrant eyes, clouded by pain, offered a final, fragile smile as they met Samara's desperate gaze. "Mom, please," Samara whispered, her voice choked with terror and sorrow, tears streaming down her face. "Don't leave us." Dragos's anguished cry erupted as he cradled his dying wife, his own tears mingling with the spilled blood, a raw, aching testament to loss. The relentless storm outside seemed to mourn with them, its howl a twisted echo of their despair. Serenity's final words, a whisper barely audible over the clamor of rain and anguish, cut through Dragos's heart. "Take care of her, Dragos." And then, with a shuddering exhalation, a final, fragile breath, Serenity was gone. In that moment, the house became a tomb of grief. The cacophony of loss mingled with the raging storm, every sound a reminder of what had been stolen by the night. Dragos's anguished cries filled the room, a despairing lament that would haunt Samara for the remainder of her days. She clung desperately to her father, her sobs mingling with his, their shared sorrow a tangible, crushing weight. Yet even in the depths of this raw devastation, something defiant ignited within Samara's soul. Amid the unbearable silence of loss, a spark of determination flared. The ferocity etched on her tear-streaked face hardened into resolute purpose. She would honor her mother's memory and ensure that the monstrous fiends, the vampires whose cruelty had torn apart her family's very core, never again claimed another innocent life. The storm's fury persisted, a harbinger of the relentless battles that lay ahead, but Samara's vow was unwavering. She would never again allow the shadows to claim her, his tears to dull her will, nor the darkness to overrun her destiny. She looked up, her eyes burning with fierce resolve even as the grief threatened to consume her. "This ends tonight," she vowed silently, her voice steady even amid the chaos. "I will never let these shadows take what is ours." In that harrowing, violent night of loss and retribution, as Dragos's anguished cries intermingled with the relentless percussion of the storm, Samara Alexandru made an unbreakable promise. With every drop of blood that stained the floor and every tear that fell into the murk, she swore to rise stronger, a beacon of defiant light against the encroaching darkness. Even as the night's horrors receded into memory, the weight of the tragedy would forever etch itself into her soul. But within that scarred heart, a legendary resolve was kindled, a promise to wage war against the creatures of the night, to stand as the final barrier between evil and the world she loved. And so, in the ruins of that fateful evening, amidst a storm of tears, blood, and shattered dreams, Samara vowed with every fiber of her being. Shadows would never again claim her. The horrors of that night had only just begun to awaken the destiny that awaited her in the darkness ahead. Chapter 3: Twilight of Hope. The room was steeped in silence, heavy and suffocating, as though the air itself mourned. The faint rustling of the evening breeze slipped through the cracks in the old wooden window panes, carrying the scent of rain-soaked earth. Dinner sat untouched on the table, its aroma now mingling with the metallic tang of blood that lingered in the air. Dragos and Samara knelt beside Serenity, their wife and mother, her lifeless body bathed in the golden hues of the setting sun. The light spilled through the window, painting her still form in a radiant glow that felt cruelly serene against the anguish gripping their hearts. Samara's trembling hand traced the delicate lines of her mother's face, committing every curve and detail to memory. Serenity's features, once so full of warmth and life, now seemed fragile, translucent beneath the pallor of death. Tears fell soundlessly onto her mother's hand, pooling in the creases of her lifeless fingers, cold and unyielding to her touch. Dragos's chest heaved with the weight of his grief, an iron hand squeezing the breath from his lungs. His trembling hands hovered above Serenity's still form, unable to touch her, as though the act would shatter what little remained of his sanity. Regret clawed at his mind, each, what if, hammering against his resolve. A single tear slipped from his eye, landing on his wife's cheek, as though it could somehow coax her back from the abyss. "I failed you," he whispered, his voice breaking under the rawness of his confession. "I wasn't fast enough, strong enough. I wasn't enough." Samara turned her tear-streaked face toward him, wanting to reassure him, to tell him that none of this was his fault. But the words caught in her throat, strangled by the vice of her grief. She could only sit there, silent and broken, as the storm outside raged on. The moon rose steadily into the night sky, its silver light casting long, shifting shadows across the room. It bathed Serenity in an ethereal glow, making her appear more like a slumbering angel than a lifeless body. The sight brought a fresh wave of tears to Samara's eyes. The world seemed to mock their pain, offering beauty in the midst of devastation, a cruel juxtaposition that twisted the knife in her heart all the more. Then, a sound, a faint creak, barely perceptible, interrupted the stillness. Dragos's head snapped up, his instincts honed by years of vigilance. Samara felt it too, a prickling at the back of her neck that raised every hair on her body. The room, once heavy with sorrow, now thrummed with an ominous energy. The soft glow of the moonlight suddenly seemed sinister, the shadows dancing with malicious intent. The sound came again, louder this time, accompanied by the shuffle of feet. Dragos rose to his feet in a single, fluid motion, his grief replaced by hardened resolve. "They've come back," he muttered, his voice laced with fury. Samara's heart plunged into her stomach as the realization hit her like a tidal wave. The vampire who had fled earlier in the night had returned, but he was not alone. The door burst open with a deafening crash, slamming against the wall with enough force to splinter the wood. The returning vampire stood at the forefront, his once panicked demeanor replaced with cold, calculated menace. Behind him, a swarm of his kind poured into the room, their feral eyes glinting like molten gold and their fangs bared in predatory anticipation. Dragos didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, his weapon flashing as he met the first vampire head-on. The room erupted into chaos as fists collided with flesh and steel clashed against bone. Dragos fought like a man possessed, his strikes precise and lethal, each swing a testament to his strength and skill. But the vampires were relentless, their movements swift and unpredictable, their strength inhuman. "Samara, run," Dragos bellowed, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Save yourself." Samara hesitated, her feet rooted to the floor as the first wave of vampires lunged toward her father. She couldn't leave him. Not now, not like this. But his voice boomed again, sharper this time, filled with the weight of authority and desperation. "Go." Tears blurred her vision as she stumbled toward the doorway, her chest heaving with every labored breath. She didn't want to leave him, but deep down, she knew she had no choice. Her father was buying her time with his life, and she couldn't let his sacrifice be in vain. Behind her, the battle raged. Dragos was a whirlwind of motion, his weapon flashing with lethal precision as he fought off the advancing horde. His strikes were calculated, each swing a testament to his strength and skill, and for a fleeting moment, it seemed as though he might hold them back. But the odds were against him. There were too many of them, their movements swift and unpredictable, their strength inhuman. Samara dared to glance back, her heart breaking as she saw her father surrounded, the tide of enemies pressing in on him like a suffocating wave. His cries of defiance echoed through the room, mingling with the snarls and growls of the vampires. And then, in an instant that seemed to stretch into eternity, she saw him fall. A gasp escaped her lips as she froze in place, her mind refusing to process what her eyes were telling her. Dragos, Her unshakable pillar of strength lay motionless on the ground, his once powerful form now lifeless. The vampires descended upon him, their fangs sinking into his flesh with horrifying greed. Samara wanted to scream, to run to him, to do something, anything, but her body refused to obey. The vampires, sated and victorious, turned their glowing eyes toward her. For a moment, they simply stood there, their blood-stained mouths curling into sinister grins. And then, as if answering some unspoken command, they retreated into the night, their figures dissolving into the shadows as silently as they had come. Samara collapsed to her knees beside her father, her trembling hands reaching out to touch him as though to confirm that he was real, that this nightmare was real. "No," she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of her grief. "No, no, no." Dragos's eyelids fluttered weakly, and he managed to meet her gaze. The light in his eyes was dim, flickering like a candle on the verge of being extinguished. "Samara," he rasped, his voice barely audible. "You have to carry on. Your training, it's prepared you for this." "Dad, please," she begged, tears streaming down her face as she clutched his hand. "Don't leave me. I can't do this without you." "You can," he said, his words filled with a quiet strength that belied his fading life. "You're stronger than you know." A single tear slipped from the corner of his eye as he exhaled one final, shuddering breath. Samara felt his hand go limp in hers, and a wrenching sob tore from her throat as the reality of his death crashed over her. She was alone. The room was silent once more, but it was a silence that screamed of loss, a silence that weighed heavier than any sound ever could. The storm outside seemed to mirror her grief, its winds howling in mourning, its rain falling like the tears of the heavens. Samara knelt there for what felt like hours, her body racked with sobs as the memories of her parents played in her mind like a cruel, unrelenting film. She thought of her mother's laughter, her father's unwavering strength, the love they had shared as a family. And now, they were gone, torn from her by the monsters who lurked in the shadows. But as the night wore on, something stirred within her. It was a small spark, buried deep beneath the layers of her grief, a spark of determination, of resolve. She would not let their deaths be in vain. She would honor their memory by fighting back, by hunting down the creatures who had destroyed her family. Wiping her tears, Samara stood on shaky legs. Her heart was heavy, but her gaze was steely, her jaw set with newfound purpose. This was not the end, it was the beginning. The hunt had begun. Chapter 4: The Call of Shadows. The night was a stifling shroud, its oppressive silence pressing against every surface as if the darkness itself were alive. In the dimly lit kitchen of her shattered home, Samara Alexandru stood motionless, her heart pounding a fierce, erratic rhythm. The low hum of the refrigerator was the solitary sound, a mundane echo of a life lost to cruelty. Just hours before, her world had been whole, but now everything was spent in blood and sorrow. Her parents, Dragos and Serenity, had been savagely ripped from her life by creatures that lurked in the shadows, monsters whose existence had once been the stuff of whispered legends. Vampires. Just the word made her blood run cold, evoking images of glistening fangs propelled by insatiable hunger and eyes that burned with an otherworldly, predatory gleam. Her gaze fell on a crumpled piece of paper pinned haphazardly to the refrigerator door. Written in bold, urgent strokes was a name and a number, Detective Pat Valentine. It was unmistakably her father's handwriting, strong, deliberate, as if he had foreseen the calamity that would soon befall them. That note was a lifeline thrown into a dark, endless abyss. With trembling hands, Samara reached for the phone. Its cold metal scent shivers down her spine as she dialed the number, each ring sounding like the toll of a death knell. Detective Valentine speaking, came the calm, deep voice from the other end, edged with cautious curiosity. For a moment, Samara's throat tightened, her voice barely audible over the pounding of her heart. "Mr. Valentine, I had a note to call you if I needed help," she managed, her words choked by grief and raw fear. A heavy silence stretched before him. "Who is this?" he finally asked, his tone measured, yet kind enough to soften the inevitable blow. "My name is Samara Alexandru," she replied, voice wavering. "My parents, they were murdered." The weight of her confession seemed to absorb every sound. Samara could almost hear the slow, painful intake of breath on the other side, the shock reverberating in the silence that followed. "I'm so sorry, dear," Detective Valentine said at last, his voice softening with genuine sympathy. "I'll be right over. We'll figure this out together." The line went dead, and Samara was left with that crushing quiet. She sank into a chair, her hands gripping the phone, as if it could somehow channel a shred of comfort. The minutes dragged, each second steeped in an agony that threatened to swallow her whole. The shadows in the room deepened, as if the very night were closing in, growing denser and sharper, promising secrets and horror in equal measure. Then, a sudden, sharp knock shattered the stillness, a sound that shattered the heavy silence like breaking glass. Samara's heart leaped to her throat as she rose on unsteady legs and approached the door, her hand hovering over the cold doorknob. The creaking hinges protested as she slowly opened the door to reveal a man standing in the murky half-light. Detective Pat Valentine was not the gaunt specter of myth. He was of average height with a solid, sturdy build hidden beneath a deep tan trench coat that seemed to devour the pale light around him. A dark gray hat, worn low over his eyes, gave him an enigmatic, almost ethereal quality. His piercing gaze locked onto hers, steady, unwavering, yet imbued with a warmth that belied the grim business of tonight. "Are you Samara?" he asked, calm and steady in his tone. "Yes," she whispered, each syllable trembling with pity and defiance. "Are you Mr. Valentine?" "That's me," he confirmed, his eyes softening as he studied her grief-stricken face. "May I come in? I need to see what happened." Relinquishing her fear for a moment, Samara stepped aside, beckoning him into a scene of devastation. The room, once a sanctuary of family warmth, was transformed into a silent battlefield. The lifeless bodies of Dragos and Serenity lay splayed against the pale moonlight streaming through the window, a ghostly tableau of horror. Shadows danced mockingly around their still forms, animated by the flickers of moonlight that betrayed the violent struggle within the room. Detective Valentine's jaw clenched as he took in the scene. His eyes, dark with restrained anger, swept over the carnage. Shattered glass from broken picture frames, spilled remnants of a life violently disrupted, and deep marks on the walls that told of a battle fought fiercely within these very confines. He knelt beside Dragos, his fingers hovering over the man's wrist, confirming the silence of life. Rising slowly, he turned to Samara, his gaze hardening with resolve. "We'll find out who did this, Samara," he said with quiet determination, "and we'll make them pay." A flame of hope ignited deep within her, a fragile spark fighting against a tide of despair. With newfound resolve, Samara forced her grief into determination. "I want help," she declared, her voice steadier now despite the storm of emotions raging within her. "I want to fight back." Detective Valentine looked at her thoughtfully, recognizing in her the mark of someone who had tasted suffering and yet refused to succumb to it. "You're brave, Samara," he finally said. "But this isn't just about fighting back in the usual way. You're up against creatures that don't follow our rules, monsters that thrive in darkness. Vampires, yes, and there are rumors of werewolves prowling on the outskirts too, drawn to the carnage of this cursed night." Her eyes widened at the mention of werewolves, the feral legends that had haunted childhood fears. "I've heard tales," Samara murmured, the chill of their presence mingling with her own determination. I don't know how strong they are, but I know I won't let them win. Valentine's voice softened, his tone resolute. Then we must be smarter than them. We begin by uncovering every clue they left behind. Tonight, we strike back with the full force of our resolve. A slow smile broke beneath his dark hat. Now, let's get to work. Drawing a steadying breath, Samara nodded. The echo of her father's final, unyielding words, a prophecy now etched into her heart, resonated once more. One day, I won't be here. It will be your duty to keep the world safe. That burden, once a source of overwhelming sorrow, now burned like a beacon of unbreakable will. Together, they moved through the room methodically, Detective Valentine taking in every detail, the scattered shards of porcelain, the splatter of blood that painted a macabre mosaic across the floor, and the deep, jagged marks of struggle on the walls. Each mark, each broken. Piece of the past was a testament to an assault by those lurking creatures of the night, vampires with their unnatural coldness, and even whispers of savage werewolves hiding in the darkness beyond the windowpane. Valentine's investigation was precise, his every touch imbued with both professional rigor and familiar grief. As he pieced together clues, Samara's vulnerability transformed into a fierce vow. I want to be a part of this fight, Detective. I want to help stop these monsters, to make sure no one else loses what I have. Her voice wavered only slightly with raw determination. Noble words, Valentine replied as he paused, regarding her with sympathetic intensity. But remember, these creatures are cunning. They strike under the cover of darkness, and they're not just mindless predators. Their numbers grow, and there are those who work together, with alliances between vampires and, as many rumors suggest, werewolves. They don't fight by human rules. You must be prepared for battles that will push you far beyond any limits you think you have. A harsh wind rattled the window, sending a shiver through the room and stirring the dark corners where shadows twisted like silent witnesses. Outside, the storm's fury only deepened, mirroring the turbulent emotions within. Samara, feeling the weight of both her grief and newfound resolve, gave a determined nod. I won't let them win, she whispered, her eyes locking with his in a silent pledge of defiance. With the detective's assurance and her own fierce promise, the room, once a tomb of sorrow, transformed into a launching ground for retribution. The night was far from over, and darkness still harbored unspeakable dangers, but together, they had ignited a spark of hope. That hope, fragile though it might be, would be the fuel for the war that lay ahead. As Detective Valentine left to begin his meticulous investigation, and Samara watched him go with lingering steely resolve, the silence returned, a silence punctuated only by the echoing drip of rain and the low, grim rumble of distant thunder. In that moment, with memories of violence and loss etched into every corner of the ruined home, Samara's eyes hardened into a mirror of defiant purpose. She had stepped into the world of shadows, and now every nightfall would be a call to arms, a call to hunt the monsters that preyed upon the innocent. And she, Samara Alexandru, would heed that call, no matter the cost. The hunt had begun, and the darkness would soon know her wrath. Chapter 5: Whispers of Grief. The kitchen was a battlefield frozen in time, its silence deafening and oppressive. Moonlight spilled through the shattered window, illuminating the lifeless forms of Dragos and Serenity Alexandru sprawled on the blood-streaked floor. Detective Pat Valentine knelt beside them, his breath hitching as he took in the scene. The warmth and laughter that had once filled this home were gone, replaced by the cold, unyielding grip of death. The shadows seemed to mock him, twisting and writhing in the pale light as if reveling in the devastation. Pat's trembling hand rested lightly on Dragos' shoulder, his fingertips brushing against the man's cold, unmoving body. The touch sent a jolt through his soul, a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the darkness that lurked in the shadows. His voice, usually steady and commanding, cracked as he whispered, "I'm sorry, my friend. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you." The weight of the moment bore down on him, and for a fleeting second, Pat allowed himself to succumb to the tidal wave of grief. He bowed his head, his shoulders hunched against the crushing sense of loss. Tears welled in his eyes, and though he fought to hold them back, a single droplet escaped and traced a path down his weathered cheek. The silence stretched, heavy and oppressive, as he granted himself a moment to meditate on the void left by Dragos and Serenity's untimely demise. But Pat was not a man who allowed despair to consume him. His grief, raw and agonizing, was quickly replaced by resolve. Rising to his feet, he took slow, deliberate steps toward the young girl standing in the corner of the room. Samara Alexandru, her eyes red and swollen from crying, her hands trembling as they clutched the hem of her shirt, was a reflection of innocence lost too soon. She looked up at Pat, her gaze pleading for answers, for strength, for anything to hold on to. He reached out and gently took her hands in his own, the warmth of his touch grounding her as her world crumbled around her. "My dear," he began, his voice soft yet steady, "your father entrusted me with a special task. He made me promise that, no matter what, I would always be there for you, and I will keep that promise." Samara's tear-filled eyes widened slightly at his words, her grief momentarily eclipsed by a flicker of hope. Pat continued, his tone tinged with both sorrow and determination. "Your father told me things long ago, things that most people would dismiss as fantasies or legends. 2 decades ago, he came to me when Las Vegas was drowning in chaos. He spoke of bloodthirsty vampires, savage werewolves, witches who wield dark powers, and zombies who roam the forgotten corners of our world. At first, I couldn't believe him, but the things I've seen since then, they haunt me to this day. He was right, Samara. These creatures exist, hidden in the shadows." Samara's face went pale, her jaw slack as she tried to process the revelation. "So, the creatures that attacked us, they were vampires?" she asked, her voice shaking with a mix of horror and disbelief. Pat nodded solemnly.
Yes.
"Their strength, their speed. It's beyond anything a human could achieve. The way your parents fought back, they were brave. But these monsters," he paused, his voice catching slightly before.
Continuing.
"They don't play fair. They are predators, and they never show mercy." A wave of emotion crashed over Samara, her grief mingling with a growing sense of rage. She clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms as the reality of her parents' deaths sank in. The tears that pooled in her eyes burned with fury as much as sadness. "They kill my mom and dad," she whispered, her voice trembling but resolute. "I want to stop them. I want to fight back." Pat's expression softened as he saw the fire ignite in her gaze, a spark of defiance that reminded him of Dragos's own strength. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're stronger than you realize, Samara, and I promise you, we'll stop them. But right now, we need to leave. It's not safe here. If they come back..." His voice trailed off, the implication clear. Samara nodded hesitantly, her heart sinking as she accepted the reality of leaving her home behind. Her childhood, the memories of simpler days filled with laughter and love, would now become a part of the past, a sanctuary she could never return to. With slow, measured steps, she made her way to her bedroom, her movements weighed down by the enormity of what lay ahead. The room, bathed in the faint glow of moonlight, was filled with relics of her life before the darkness descended. A teddy bear sat on the bed, its stitched smile a cruel mockery of the sadness enveloping her. Photos of her parents adorned the walls, their faces frozen in moments of happiness that felt like a distant dream. Samara carefully packed her belongings, each item a piece of the life she was leaving behind. Clothes were folded with deliberate precision, their weight a reminder of normalcy she might never reclaim. A small photo album, was placed gently into her bag, its pages filled with snapshots of birthdays, holidays, and quiet family moments. In the bathroom, she gathered her essentials: a brush, shampoo, toothpaste, items that now felt trivial in the face of her grief, but would offer some semblance of comfort in the days to come. When she emerged from her room, her hands trembled as they clutched the straps of her bag. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, reflecting the anguish she tried so desperately to contain. "I'm ready," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Pat stepped forward, his own emotions threatening to spill over. "Call me Pat," he said gently, offering her a small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He took her bag from her, carrying it with an air of quiet determination. The two made their way to his car, a sleek black sedan parked in the driveway. The trunk opened with a soft click, and Pat placed her belongings inside with care, as though handling something fragile. Samara climbed into the passenger seat, her body folding in on itself as she rested her elbows on her knees and buried her face in her hands. Her sobs, raw and heart-wrenching, filled the silence of the car. Pat took his place in the driver's seat, his hand reaching out to rub gentle circles on her back in an attempt to soothe her. "I know this hurts," he said quietly. "I know it feels unbearable, but you're not alone, Samara. You have me, and I will do everything in my power to protect you." Eventually, her sobs subsided, replaced by a hollow numbness that settled over her like a blanket. She stared out the window as they drove away from the house, her eyes fixed on the rain-drenched streets illuminated by the occasional flash of lightning. Her mind drifted to memories of her parents, their faces, their voices. The ache in her chest felt infinite. As the car disappeared into the darkness, Samara's thoughts turned to the night ahead, a night filled with uncertainty, danger, and the unyielding call for vengeance. The storm outside mirrored the tempest within her, its thunder rumbling like the war cry of a world caught in chaos. Lightning illuminated the shadows of towering buildings, while the rain poured in relentless sheets, drenching the city in sorrow. Samara's journey had begun. The hunt for vengeance was no longer a choice. It was her destiny. Chapter 6: The Beast Beneath the Tower. The night was a predator, its silence stalking the desolate streets of Las Vegas with an eerie, suffocating stillness. Samara Alexandru gripped the handlebars of her motorcycle, her knuckles white as she sped through the rain-soaked city. The once vibrant strip was now a ghost of its former self, its neon lights flickering weakly against the oppressive storm clouds that hung low in the sky. Rain lashed against her helmet, each drop a cold reminder of the darkness that had consumed her world. The air was thick with foreboding, every shadow a potential threat, every sound a whisper of danger. As she rode deeper into the city, a low, guttural growl began to rise above the storm's cacophony. It was a sound that seemed to come from the very earth itself, reverberating through her chest and sending a chill down her spine. The growl grew louder, more menacing, until it became a primal roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the city. Samara's heart pounded in her chest, her instincts screaming at her to turn back, but she couldn't. Something, some unseen force, pulled her forward, compelling her to face whatever lay ahead. The towering replica of the Eiffel Tower loomed in the distance, its silhouette stark against the stormy sky. Lightning illuminated its steel frame, casting jagged shadows that danced across the rain-slick streets. Samara's breath hitched as her eyes locked onto a figure perched high on the platform of the tower. It was no ordinary silhouette. The creature was massive, its form a grotesque hybrid of man and wolf. Its glowing eyes burned like twin embers in the darkness, piercing through the rain with an intensity that made her blood run cold. The moonlight framed its hulking figure, giving it an almost ethereal quality, a sinister guardian of the night. Samara's motorcycle skidded to a halt as she tore off her helmet, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The creature moved, its silhouette contorting in ways that defied nature. its spine arched and twisted, each movement accompanied by a sickening crack that echoed through the storm. Then, it let out a howl, a sound so raw, so primal, that it seemed to tear through the fabric of reality itself. The howl reverberated through the empty streets, a chilling symphony of rage and hunger that left Samara paralyzed with fear. The wolf-like being crouched low, its muscles coiling like a spring ready to snap. Samara's instincts screamed at her to flee, to turn her bike around and race away from the nightmare unfolding before her. But she couldn't move. She was rooted to the spot, her body frozen as the creature's glowing eyes locked onto hers. It was as if the beast could see into her very soul, its gaze filled with an intelligence that was both alien and terrifying. With a sudden burst of energy, the creature leapt from the platform, hurtling toward the ground with terrifying grace. The sheer audacity of the leap, the lack of hesitation or fear, only added to the terror of its approach. Samara's breath caught in her throat as she watched the beast descend, its massive form cutting through the rain like a blade. The impact was thunderous, the ground trembling beneath the force of the landing. Rising onto its hind legs, the creature towered over her, its massive frame illuminated by the flickering neon lights of the strip. Standing nearly 10 feet tall, it was a monstrous blend of ferocity and grace, its fur slick with rain, and its muscles rippling beneath its skin. The air around it seemed to vibrate with raw power, a primal energy that radiated from its very being. The wolf let out another piercing howl, the sound echoing through the empty streets like a war cry. Its eyes shifted, locking onto a man who had been cowering nearby, his face pale with terror. Before Samara could react, the beast lunged with lightning speed, its claws slamming into the man's chest and sending him sprawling to the ground. The man's screams were short-lived, drowned out by the guttural growls of the wolf as it sank its fangs into his throat. Blood sprayed across the pavement, the crimson droplets stark against the rain-soaked ground. Samara's stomach churned as she watched the gruesome scene unfold, her mind struggling to process the brutality before her. The man's lifeless body lay crumpled on the ground, his blood pooling around him as the wolf raised its head, its muzzle dripping with gore. The creature's glowing eyes turned back to her, its gaze filled with a hunger that sent a shiver down her spine. Her hands trembled as she reached for the cold metal of her pistol, the weight of the weapon grounding her in the chaos. She raised the gun, her aim steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The moonlight glinted off the barrel as she pulled the trigger, the sound of gunfire cutting through the storm. Each bullet found its mark, striking the beast's flesh and eliciting a howl of pain and rage. The creature staggered, its massive form swaying as it struggled to stay upright. Samara fired again and again, her determination unwavering. The bullets, laced with her father's blood, coursed through the beast's veins, triggering a reaction unlike anything she had ever seen. The wolf convulsed, its body contorting in a macabre dance of suffering. Its howls of agony echoed through the streets, a haunting symphony that sent shivers down her spine. As the creature collapsed at her feet, barely breathing, a chilling silence enveloped the scene. The rain continued to fall, its rhythmic patter the only sound in the aftermath of the battle. Samara stood over the beast, her chest heaving as she tried to catch her breath. The sight before her was both horrifying and surreal, a monstrous being brought low by the very essence that had given it power. In that moment, as the wolf lay defeated on the rain-soaked pavement, Samara couldn't help but ponder the bitter irony of life's twisted tapestry. Even the most fearsome of monsters could be brought to their knees, their strength undone by the very forces they sought to wield. The line between predator and prey blurred, revealing the fragility of power and the depths of pain that lurked beneath the surface of all things. The towering Eiffel Tower replica loomed above her, its lights flickering in the storm. The chaos and despair of the night seemed to fade into the background as Samara stood alone, a solitary figure in a world that had been forever changed. The battle was over, but the war was just beginning. The shadows still whispered, and the beasts still lurked. Samara tightened her grip on her pistol, her resolve hardening. The hunt was far from over. Chapter 7: Shadows of Revelation. The night was a predator, its silence stalking the rain-soaked streets of Las Vegas with an oppressive weight. Samara Alexandru stood frozen, her breath shallow and ragged, as the grotesque transformation unfolded before her. The monstrous creature that had towered over her moments ago, a beast of primal ferocity and unrelenting hunger, was now crumbling before her eyes. Its mighty frame shrank inward, collapsing like a storm cloud shedding its fury. The snarls that had once echoed through the streets turned to faint, pitiful gasps, and its razor-sharp claws curled inward, retreating as though they had never existed. Samara's pulse raced, her heart pounding a violent rhythm against her chest. The beast's lustrous fur began to dissolve, patches of it disintegrating into ash-like wisps that vanished into the damp air. Its glowing eyes, those haunting orbs that had burned with unearthly fire, dimmed until they were no more than dull, lifeless remnants. And there, crumpled beneath the torrential rain, lay a frail human figure. The transition from predator to mortal was surreal, a haunting reminder of the fragility of power and the fleeting nature of existence. Her fingers trembled as she clutched the handle of her pistol, its barrel still warm from the final shot. The scene before her defied comprehension, as though the veil between worlds had been ripped apart. The blood that had once pulsed through the creature's veins with supernatural vigor now seeped from its wounds in sluggish, all too human rivulets. The rain washed it away, mingling with the grime of the city streets, as if trying to erase the evidence of the horror that had just transpired. Samara's lips parted, but no sound emerged. Her mind raced to process what she had witnessed, a moment that blurred the line between predator and prey, between monster and man. In the shadows, true selves are unveiled. She whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the relentless patter of rain. And in the darkness, reality unfolds. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air, a fragile truth that sent a shiver down her spine. For all the terror she had faced, there was an undeniable beauty to what she had witnessed, a glimpse into the unknown that both terrified and fascinated her. The darkness held its secrets close, but tonight it had chosen to share one with her. And what it had revealed was as fragile as it was horrifying. The crowd that had gathered around the scene was eerily silent, their collective breaths held as though exhaling might shatter the delicate equilibrium of the moment. Faces blurred by rain and shadows stared in disbelief, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. A ripple of gasps spread like a wave as the monstrous figure crumbled further, shrinking into itself until it was no more than a broken shell of a man. The man lay exposed in the rain, his form pitiable and frail, his bare chest heaving shallowly with the remnants of life. The crowd murmured nervously, their whispers blending with the rain. But then, without warning, the man's body convulsed one final time, shuddering violently as though caught in the grip of an unseen force. In an instant, his fragile form collapsed into ash, an unremarkable pile of fine gray dust that scattered in the wind, leaving no evidence of his existence. The transformation was complete. The creature, the man, it was as if neither had ever been there at all. Gasps and cries of disbelief erupted from the bystanders, breaking the uneasy silence. People clutched at each other, their faces etched with the horror of what they had just witnessed. Some stumbled backward, shaking their heads as though to dismiss the memory. Others leaned closer, desperate to find any trace of the figure that had dissolved before their eyes. But there was nothing left, no flesh, no bone, no monster. Samara's legs felt like they might give out beneath her, but she forced herself to move. She approached the fallen man who had been the victim of the wolf's savage attack, her boots splashing through the rain-soaked street. His body lay limp, his throat torn open in a grotesque display of violence. Her heart clenched painfully in her chest as she knelt beside him, her movements slow and deliberate. Reaching out with trembling fingers, she gently closed his glassy, unseeing eyes. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. "I failed you. I couldn't protect you." A tear slid down her cheek, warm despite the cold rain that lashed her face. The sight of the man's lifeless body brought a flood of memories crashing over her, memories of her parents, taken from her in a similarly brutal fashion. The anguish she had felt then was raw and biting, and now it threatened to consume her once more. Another tear followed the first, then another, until they blurred her vision and mingled with the rain. "Father," she thought, her mind a storm of emotions. "How am I supposed to do this alone? How can I carry this burden when I feel like I'm breaking under its weight?" The heavy mantle of responsibility pressed down on her, suffocating and inescapable. She felt small and powerless in the face of it, a single soul tasked with fighting back against the darkness that had consumed her world. The rain continued to fall, relentless and unyielding, as Samara rose to her feet. Her body felt leaden, her muscles stiff and uncooperative. She turned away from the scene, her heart weighed down by the immeasurable loss and the unbearable knowledge that she was powerless to undo it. Each step she took felt like an eternity, a journey through the shards of a broken world. When she finally reached her motorcycle, Samara paused, her fingers gripping the handlebars as she let out a long, shuddering sigh. Her pistol, once a symbol of defiance and strength, now felt like a hollow artifact in her hand, a reminder of what she had failed to prevent. With a heavy heart, she slipped it back into its sheath, the click of the holster echoing in the otherwise silent street. The weight of the moment settled over her like a suffocating shroud as she mounted her bike. Her movements were slow and deliberate, each one laden with the sorrow that clung to her. The helmet she placed on her head felt heavier than ever, its familiar comfort now a burden. When she gripped the handlebars, her knuckles turned white, her fingers tightening as though holding on for dear life. The engine roared to life, its growl cutting through the rain's persistent rhythm. The sound should have been empowering, but it only echoed the turmoil within her, a cacophony of pain, doubt, and fleeting resolve. As the bike screeched away from the scene, its tires kicking up water in their wake, Samara felt the tears she had fought so hard to contain spill freely down her face. The thoughts that had plagued her since her parents' deaths returned with renewed force, their haunting whispers echoing in her mind. "The fate of the world rests upon your shoulders," they said, each word a weight that dragged her deeper into despair. No matter how she tried to ground herself, to focus on the road ahead, the whispers refused to be silenced. They grew louder, more insistent, until they consumed her entirely. Doubt curled around her heart like a serpent, its venomous whispers eroding her confidence. How could she protect a world so vast and unpredictable when she couldn't even save a single soul? Yet, even as the doubt threatened to suffocate her, a spark of something else flickered within her, a stubborn ember of determination that refused to be extinguished. Samara's thoughts became a battle of wills, the chaos in her mind reflected in the storm that raged around her. The road ahead was long and shrouded in shadows, but she knew she couldn't turn away. The stakes were too high, the cost of failure too great. She had to rise above her fears, to find the strength within herself to face the darkness that loomed on the horizon. As the rain blurred the world around her, Samara whispered to herself, her voice steady despite the storm. It's time to confront the truth, to embrace the darkness and uncover the secrets it hides. Her gaze fixed firmly on the road ahead, she tightened her grip on the handlebars and pressed forward into the night. Chapter 8: Echoes of the Past. The realization hit Samara Alexandru like a freight train, a force so unyielding it left her breathless. Her father's ominous warning, once a distant echo, now roared in her mind with chilling clarity. For years, she had tried to outrun it, burying herself in fleeting moments of comfort and distraction. But the truth was inescapable, always lurking at the edges of her consciousness. It had been half a decade since she had last set foot in her childhood home, the place where her parents' lives had been so mercilessly stolen. The very thought of returning to that house filled her with dread. It wasn't just the memories that haunted her, it was the unanswered questions, the shadows of secrets that had yet to be unearthed. If she wanted to confront the darkness threatening to consume her, she had to go back. Her father's warning, so long ago, now echoed with chilling clarity in her mind. Never stop seeking the truth, Samara. It's the only way to survive in a world like ours. His words had felt heavy even then, but now they carried the weight of necessity, a desperate call to action. Her heart ached with every syllable that resurfaced in her memory, pressing her forward despite the reluctance clawing at her. The night was unforgiving, the storm relentless as Samara rode her motorcycle through the tempest. The rain pelted her visor like icy needles, and the wind tugged at her jacket with brutal force. Her fingers gripped the handlebars tighter. With each passing moment, the vibration of the engine beneath her a steady reminder to keep moving forward. Traffic was scarce at this hour, and the city around her felt eerie and lifeless, illuminated only by the occasional flicker of streetlights and the glow of neon signs from long-closed establishments. She navigated through the labyrinth of nighttime streets with a determination that burned bright within her. Every turn, every mile brought her closer to the home she had abandoned all those years ago. It was a journey fraught with conflict, the memories of that fateful night clawing at her psyche. The truth she sought was waiting for her in the shadows, and despite her fear, she yearned to uncover it. After what felt like an eternity of battling the storm, she finally arrived at the road she had avoided for so long, the road where her parents' home once stood. As Samara approached the end of the street, her heart skipped a beat. The rain softened slightly, as though the storm itself was holding its breath in anticipation of what she was about to confront. She pulled over to the side of the road, killing the engine and letting the quiet hum of the city settle over her. For a moment, she simply stared down the familiar path that led to the house, a path she had walked countless times in another life. The sight of it now sent a cold wave through her, a shiver that started at her fingertips and ran down to her very core. Her thoughts became a whirlwind of doubt and dread. Was she ready for this? Could she truly face the scene of her parents' murders and remain standing? The weight of the decision pressed down on her, causing tears to well in her eyes despite her efforts to hold them back. The storm raged on around her, the wind howling like an unspoken challenge. Samara felt as though she stood at the precipice of her emotions, the road ahead a symbol of everything she had lost. She whispered to herself, her voice trembling, "Am I really prepared for this?" Her words hung in the air, unanswered, the rain soaking them into the asphalt like ink on parchment. Fear overtook her, and without warning, Samara made a sharp U-turn on her motorcycle. The wind whipped at her face as she sped away from the house, her movements frantic and uncoordinated. Tears streamed down her cheeks, blurring her vision and mingling with the rain. "I can't do this," she whispered to herself, her voice almost drowned out by the roar of the engine. But as she rode further, the world around her began to close in. The mile marker she passed felt like a boundary, a point of no return separating familiarity from the unknown. Samara came to another abrupt halt, her bike skidding slightly on the wet pavement. She stared out at the cityscape before her, the distant lights glowing like beacons in the storm. Her thoughts raced, the fear and pain swirling inside her like a tempest. "I'll never be ready for this," she admitted silently, her voice filled with anguish. The shadows of her past taunted her, but amidst the chaos in her mind, a small flicker of resolve began to ignite. Deep down, she knew that the darkness she feared so much wouldn't wait for her to gather courage. The abominations lurking in the shadows wouldn't give her the luxury of time or preparation. She had to face them now, imperfect and afraid, and take that first step. Her resolve strengthened as her fingers tightened around the handlebars. In a moment of clarity, Samara made the decision to turn back once more, her motorcycle cutting through the rain like a knife through water. She rode toward the source of her nightmares, pushing past the memories threatening to drown her. The road stretched out before her, and though the path was daunting, she knew she couldn't afford to falter. Arriving at the house felt like entering a dream, a haunting, surreal version of the life she once knew. Samara parked her motorcycle and took a moment to collect herself. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and the quiet around her was deafening. With trembling hands, she removed her helmet, letting the cool breeze brush against her face. Her mind raced with thoughts of what awaited her inside, what truths she might uncover, and what horrors she might relive. She approached the door with hesitant steps, her keys clutched tightly in her hand. The weight of her father's warning pressed down on her shoulders, and with each movement, she felt as though she was carrying a piece of the past with her. The sound of the key turning in the lock was sharp and deliberate, echoing in her ears like a tolling bell. There was no turning back now. Samara gripped the doorknob, her knuckles white, and pushed the door open. The sight that greeted her was unexpected. The room, once the scene of chaos and tragedy, had been tidied up completely. There was no trace left of the bloodshed, no lingering signs of the violence that had taken her parents. The space was clean, almost clinical, as if someone had scrubbed away every last remnant of that horrific night. Samara's eyes darted to the spot where her parents had died, and a wave of memories crashed over her with unbearable force. Grief overwhelmed her. Her knees buckled beneath her, and she collapsed to the floor, her body shaking with sobs that she could no longer contain. Tears streamed down her face in torrents, each one a painful reminder of the void her parents had left behind. She bowed her head in anguish, her hands clutching at her sides as if trying to hold herself together. The silence of the room was suffocating, echoing the emptiness in her heart. Samara felt as though the house itself mourned with her, its walls cold and unfeeling, bearing witness to her pain. The memories of happier times, of laughter and warmth, seemed almost cruel now, a stark contrast to the emptiness she faced. "I miss you, Mom and Dad," she whispered, her voice breaking. The words carried the weight of her longing and sorrow, drifting into the void like petals on the wind. The ache in her heart was relentless, a constant reminder of the love she had lost. As she knelt on the floor, her grief threatened to consume her, leaving her adrift in a sea of sorrow. The room remained still, offering no comfort, yet, despite the pain, Samara knew she couldn't let herself drown in it. She had come here for a reason, to uncover the truth, to face the shadows that had claimed her family. And as the storm continued to rage outside, Samara steeled herself once more, preparing to confront whatever awaited her in the darkness. Chapter 9: The Secrets Within. Samara's tears fell freely, each one a heavy, sorrowful droplet reverberating against the cold, unforgiving floor of her childhood home. The silence in the room was absolute, a silence imbued with grief so potent it almost seemed to speak, every quiet moment echoing with the shattered memories of laughter, love, and loss. Here, in what was once the sanctuary of her family, every crack in the worn wooden floor and every fading beam of light bore witness to the lives that had been so brutally snatched away. Her heart pounded in tumultuous rhythms, and the weight of her sorrow pressed down on her chest like lead. The past surged in vivid flashes, the protective gaze of her father at the window, his strong, reassuring voice, the joyful melody of her mother's laughter now silenced forever. Those memories, so tender and sweet once, now offered only anguish and regret. The realization that she would never again hear their voices or feel their embrace crashed over her with the relentless force of a tidal wave. Fighting back sobs that threatened to overwhelm her, Samara slowly lifted her head. She scanned the lifeless emptiness that filled the once happy home. Every corner seemed to murmur secrets of a bygone era, a time of family dinners, warm embraces, and whispered promises of eternal safety. Now, those walls stood stripped of their former life, reduced to ghostly relics haunted by echoes of laughter now turned to silence. Gritting her teeth, she whispered, "I will never forget you. I will keep your memory alive in my heart, no matter how painful it may be." Each syllable fell into the quiet, a solemn vow that would symbiotically join her grief and determination. For her parents, for the legacy of love and valor they had left her, she knew she must rise from the wreckage of her sorrow and confront the secrets that haunted these halls. With trembling determination, Samara forced herself to stand. Her movements were slow and deliberate, each step an arduous task as though the air itself had thickened, refusing to let her escape the crushing weight of loss. The coolness of the floor beneath her fingertips was at once a harsh reminder of her isolation and the grounding force that kept her anchored to the present. Clutching her fists, she began the painful journey toward the office at the back of the house, a place her father had long guarded, a chamber whispered of in half-remembered childhood stories and rumored to hold truths too dangerous for the ordinary mind. The hallway stretched before her like a gauntlet. Every creak of the wooden floor and whisper of the wind through cracked panes heightened the gnawing tension inside her. Light and shadow danced in the narrow corridor as if conspiring to reveal secrets, and perhaps even hidden dangers, that lay buried within. Here, in this desolate passage, Samara felt the ghostly imprint of her father's presence. Every step echoed with his silent encouragement, every breath stirred with remnants of his love. Finally, she reached the door. Her hand reached out, trembling, closing in on the cold metal of the doorknob. For a long heartbeat, uncertainty gripped her. What awaited beyond this threshold? What nefarious secrets had her father locked away in this sanctuary of his life? Her mind swirled with questions, the anxious chatter of doubts and desperate hopes merging into a single relentless cry for truth. Taking a final, shuddering breath, she closed her eyes. In that silent moment, she summoned the memory of her father's gentle, yet firm voice. "Never stop seeking the truth, Samara. It's the only way to survive in a world like ours." His words, once distant echoes, now surged powerfully through her veins. With that invocation, she turned the knob. The door creaked open, its sound loud and jarring in the hushed darkness, revealing a chamber that seemed to pulsate with life and mystery. Before her eyes, the room unfolded like a hidden world of secrets and danger. Dominating the far wall was a massive world map, its surface a kaleidoscope of red pins, each one a marker of a place her father had visited, a testament to his relentless pursuit of knowledge about the supernatural. Yet these were no ordinary markers. Each red pin held a tiny figurine, a werewolf with eyes fierce and defiant from Germany, a vampire with glistening fangs from Romania, a zombie, decayed and tormented, from Las Vegas, and for New Orleans, a complex medley of witches, werewolves, and vampires, hinting at the city's reputation as a vortex for the paranormal. Samara moved slowly toward the map, her awe intermingled with heartache. Her fingers brushed over the figurines, each tiny statue sparking fleeting visions of her father, a robust, daring man who had walked amidst monsters and darkness, confronting creatures that preyed on unsuspecting souls. In those moments, she saw him fighting off snarling werewolves with fierce determination and standing unflinching against venomous vampires whose fangs could shred through human flesh.
The map
Was a portal into that shadowed world, a lineage inherited and a destiny beckoning. To the right of the map, a shelf was laden with ancient books and grimoires. Their spines were cracked, their titles laden with warnings and arcane knowledge. Volumes dedicated to the lore of vampires that lurked in secluded cemeteries and werewolves that roamed under the full moon, among other abominations, beckoned her to read. Even the mere presence of these books set her heart racing, a tangible link to a world of supernatural terror that her father had faced at great personal cost. Her gaze then shifted to a rickety wooden desk, cluttered with relics of a life dedicated to fighting darkness. There, lying amid scattered papers and unopened letters, rested a weathered journal with a leather cover cracked by time. It called to her with silent urgency, a final message from the man whose pen had chronicled a lifetime of clandestine battles and cryptic revelations. With her heart pounding in apprehensive anticipation and a newfound resolve ignited by raw grief and determination, she reached out, her fingers trembling as they traced the embossed letters on the cover. The leather was cool against her touch as she slowly opened the journal, the pages emitting a soft, ancient crackle, as if the past itself were whispering its secrets. The handwriting was unmistakably her father's, each stroke imbued with clarity and precision, chronicling encounters with gargantuan beasts and cunning creatures of the night. Here, in these hallowed pages, were detailed accounts of fateful confrontations, vicious vampires whose eyes burned with icy malice in the corridors of crumbling mansions, brutal werewolf pack battles under the silver glare of the full moon, and the subtle yet dangerous machinations of witches who wielded dark magics in secret cabals. The journal documented strategies, recounted battles, and even confessed personal fears. It was both a war diary and a beacon, a guide to navigating the treacherous realm her father had once roamed with fearless determination. As she read on, a maelstrom of emotion churned within her. The completed entries filled her with both terror and a stark, defiant hope. In meticulously penned lines, her father had warned her of the relentless dangers that lurked in the shadows, a life dedicated to battling creatures that defied all human laws. He had faced vampires that struck with ruthless precision and werewolves whose savage roars shattered the stillness of midnight. Each recorded bout was a testament to the risks taken and the precious toll of victory. His words, now serving as her rallying cry, urged her to embrace this legacy with courage.